Today, we're going to trace a really complex legal journey. Now, our goal here isn't to point fingers or find blame. It's more like we're piecing together a procedural puzzle, but we're doing it through the eyes of the people actually living it, to really get a feel for how the system looks from the inside.
All right, so here's our plan. First, we'll look at the path on paper, what the claimants thought was going to happen. Then, we'll hit that unexpected turn, the moment things went off script. We'll see where that new path actually led them, and then wrap up by looking at the bigger questions this whole thing raises about transparency in the legal system.
Okay, let's begin with what everyone expected. For the claimants, Viktor and Maryna, the journey ahead seemed, well, pretty straightforward. It looked like it was all mapped out for them, right there in the official documents they were holding. So after they filed their application with a judge, they were basically expecting a standard, almost technical process to kick off. The next step was supposed to be this thing called a Judicial Case Management session, or a JCM. And in their minds, this meeting was all about one thing: moving their case along towards a real hearing on their application, and eventually to trial.
And this wasn't just a hunch. Their expectation was really solidified by two key pieces of paper. First, there was a written direction from a judge that explicitly said their application requires a hearing. Can't get much clearer than that, right? Then a notice from the registry shows up setting a specific date and time. So for them, this was concrete proof. This was the path forward. So when you look at all the official paperwork they had, the path forward just looked crystal clear. It was logical, it seemed totally transparent, and honestly, pretty unambiguous. Okay, now we're getting to the judicial case management session itself. And it was right here, from Viktor and Maryna's perspective, that the path suddenly, it veered off in a direction they absolutely did not see coming.
So they walk into this meeting expecting to talk about the next steps for a hearing on their application. But instead, as they saw it, the focus just immediately flipped. The conversation turned to arranging another settlement conference with the very same judge. It felt like their own legal motion was suddenly being shoved onto the back burner.
And you can see Viktor tried to pull the conversation back on track. He basically said, hey, wait a minute. The whole reason I filed this application was to get away from more settlement talks and finally move toward an open, formal hearing. He was really trying to steer things back to the path he thought they were on. So in response, the JCM described their role as, just technical. They're just there to schedule dates based on what a judge tells them. But then came this one critical phrase that, for the claimants, changed everything. The JCM mentioned that clarifications were received this morning. For Viktor and Maryna, that was the moment the ground just shifted beneath them. All of a sudden, it felt like the direction of their case wasn't being guided by the official documents they had in their hands, but by these unseen morning clarifications and some internal court notes. As they saw it, huge decisions were now being made based on information they couldn't see it and had no access to. So what did this turn actually mean in practice? What were the real-world consequences? Let's take a look at the new destination that was being laid out for them.
Well, the immediate result was that their application, the one a judge had already said requires a hearing, was adjourned, just pushed off to some future date. For Viktor and Maryna, it must have felt like their own legal initiative was being put on ice, while the court's focus was still squarely on trying to get a settlement.
And then came another little procedural twist. It turns out the settlement judge wasn't available for another conference, so a whole new format was proposed. Instead of a conference, it would now be a formal in-court hearing, on the record. But it was still going to be in front of the same judge, and from their point of view, the main topic hadn't changed at all. It was still all about that disputed settlement. And the amount of time they were given for this brand new formal hearing, 30 minutes. Just 30 minutes to deal with what they saw as an incredibly complex situation. So suddenly, everything was being bundled together. All the outstanding documents, including their own application that started this whole thing, were all funneled into this one single 30-minute session. And as they understood it, the main event, the central focus, was going to be on enforcing the very settlement terms they were trying to fight. So by this point, from the claimant's perspective, the whole trajectory of their case had been completely altered, and this change led them to start asking bigger, more fundamental questions about the legal process itself. So let's just recap their journey from their point of view. They believed they were on a clear, documented path toward a trial, a path they kicked off with their own application. But now, that path had been completely rerouted. Instead of moving forward, it felt like their case had been sent backwards, right back to dealing with a past issue, the very settlement they were hoping to move beyond.
And all of this left Viktor and Maryna with a list of really crucial, unanswered questions. Like, what on earth was in those morning clarifications? Who actually made the decision to shift the whole focus of that meeting away from their application? And what was the basis for that decision? For them, the core issue wasn't even about the settlement anymore. It was about trying to understand how and why these pivotal procedural decisions were being made, seemingly behind a curtain.
And that brings us to the central question this whole journey raises, a question that really goes far beyond this one particular case. It's not about who was right or who was wrong. It's about the process itself. How visible should those turns in the road of justice really be to the people whose lives are riding on the final destination?